Hello, everyone. This is Rob Orrison with the Prince William County Historic Preservation Division, coming to you here on a very beautiful day here at Prince William County's newest historic site. This is Cockpit Point Civil War Park. The park is yet to be open to the public. We have lots of great plans for out here, but we want to kind of give you a little virtual tour of this property since you cannot access this property. Right behind me here is the Potomac River. The eastern part of Prince William, and this is one of the reasons why I love working for Prince William so much, because not only do we have the Potomac River and Tidewater, we also had the Piedmont and we had the mountains. So Prince William kind of covers all three geographic areas of Virginia. It's one of the few counties that do that. And like I said, we're here on the Potomac River, right on the eastern end of the county. And Maryland starts right at the water. So we're right up against the state of Maryland behind me. But the Civil War story of Cockpit Point is pretty interesting in itself. This high bluff here, a couple hundred feet above the Potomac River, is a great location if you are trying to cut off any boat traffic or ship traffic here on the Potomac. In 1861, as the American Civil War began and Virginia secedes in May of 1861, quickly the Virginians start building forts and fortifications and batteries up along the Potomac River to try to hinder all the river traffic going up to Washington, D.C. Keep in mind, in the 1860s, Washington is being supplied via the river by 80% of all of the supplies going to Washington, D.C. to support the government, to support people living in the city, and to support the now growing army in Washington, D.C. The river is providing most of those supplies. And so to cut off the river here could help the Virginians and the Confederate Army really hinder some of the things going on here at Cockpit Point, or actually what we call this is Possum Nose. Cockpit Point's about a quarter mile off to my right and your left. This bluff was called Possum Nose, but today it's called Cockpit Point because the soldiers called it that in the 1860s. We'll see the first guns being placed here in the fall of 1861. The very first battery along the Potomac River in Prince William County would be a place called Freestone Point, and that is today Leesylvania State Park. You can visit Leesylvania State Park and see some of the batteries that the Virginians built there in 1861. These are built about a few months after that, October, November 1861. You have Virginian troops, Texan troops, Tennessee troops, Alabama troops from across the South coming up here, clearing trees. This is a very wooded area today. It was wooded in 1861, but those soldiers would have cleared all those trees off of this land to not just build the fortifications along the river, but also to build their huts. Fall of 1861, they're starting getting to the wintertime, and back then, they would have to build their own huts out of wood. And so a lot of these trees would have been fallen down for not just huts, but also fuel for the fires to warm those huts. What we're going to do here is we're actually going to take you to some of the fortifications that are closed to the public, talk about how they're built, and talk about how these fortifications impacted the Civil War in 1861. We are here actually in one of the gun batteries located here at Cockpit Point, Possum Nose Batteries. I'm actually down in where the gun, a cannon, a large piece of artillery would have been sitting. It would have been facing the river behind me. Maybe through the trees, you can probably see a little bit of the water in the distance there. This is one of four batteries that were located here in the 1861 that were built by the Confederates. Some of the neater features here is not just the large area where the gun would have sat, but also the powder magazines that go off to the right and left of the main platform here. These would have been where the shells and powder would have been stored for the gun that was placed here and used to bombard the river here. Now, it's interesting to talk about the Potomac blockade because it's very much overlooked part of the American Civil War story, but it had a very immediate impact in Washington, D.C., and how the war played out in Virginia here in 1861. Now, keep in mind, as I said earlier, these gun batteries are built in the fall of 1861 to stop river traffic. Union boats, supply ships, and gunboats coming up and down the river here to get access to the Chesapeake Bay. And for a short period of time, the batteries here did close off the river. In the fall of 1861, November, Thomas Craven, who was the commander of the flotilla here for the Union Army in the water, declared the river was closed. If you wanted to get from the Chesapeake Bay to Washington, D.C., and you wanted to go by river, he said you were on your own. The United States Navy would not provide you any protection. And that is basically because of the fear of the batteries that we're standing in right here. Those ships were afraid that these guns would knock them out. And keep in mind, in the 19th century, if you were a ship captain you were not just responsible for your ship, you're also responsible for the cargo on that ship. So if one of these batteries were to take out your ship and sink your boat, you're not only out of a pretty large vessel, you also have to pay for all the cargo that's on that ship. So a lot of commerce is going to get cut off here along the river. And because of that, prices in Washington, D.C. are going to go up to 200% higher than what they were before the war. There's going to be severe shortages of fuel, of food in the city of Washington. And what that's going to do, that's going to force the large army under George McClellan, which is posted in Washington, D.C., to fan out through the countryside of Maryland, Northern Virginia, and Fairfax County to start getting supplies from the local residents. So that army is going to have to fan out along modern-day Montgomery County, Prince George's County, Arlington, and Fairfax County to look for supplies because of the river being shut off here. Now, oddly enough, even though the river is officially closed by the Navy, the United States Navy warships would go up and down this river constantly during this time period. And funny enough, not one ship was ever sunk by the batteries posted here at Cockpit Point. There's an account here of one evening of 500 shells being fired from these guns here at United States naval vessels, and not one shell hit any of the ships. So these are not expert marksmen manning these guns. Keep in mind, most of these Confederates were not artillerymen. They did not have really great experience firing these large cannon. And so they probably were not doing that great of a job firing at the ships behind me in the river. What we're going to do now, we're going to take you to another part of the gun battery and talk about the Battle of Cockpit Point, which took place January 3rd, 1862. These batteries here at Cockpit Point were built in the October-November time period of 1861. You probably had anywhere from 500 to 700 men stationed up here at different times, manning these batteries, doing communications, cooking, cleaning, doing all kinds of work up here. So this is a very busy area. Even though that with all that activity, there's really only one battle that happens here. And that battle is on January 3rd of 1862, the Battle of Cockpit Point. What happens around the Christmas time of 1861, President Abraham Lincoln in Washington is getting really antsy about the river being closed off to commerce. And he starts to really weigh in with his generals, General George B. McClellan of the Army of Potomac, to do something about these batteries, to get rid of these gun batteries here and open up the river back to commercial traffic. McClellan kind of rebuffs Lincoln a little bit, puts him off a couple of times. Lincoln just keeps on it and says, you have to get rid of these batteries. McClellan tells Lincoln that the Navy has to do it. So on January 3rd of 1862, the United States Navy sends the USS Anacostia and the USS Yankee down the river here to engage the gun batteries here along Possum Nose and Cockpit Point. For about 8 hours, the gunboats out in the water here are going to fire constantly at the batteries here at Cockpit Point. They even record taking out one of the guns, one of the 3 guns that were posted in one battery to my left here. They take that gun out. Nightfall hits, the ships go back upriver to refit. The next morning on the 4th, they will come back down the Potomac to finish off these guns. And to their much to their surprise, the Confederates have fixed all the damage that was done on January 3rd. And they'd also built a brand new battery, the one that's right here behind me. This battery was built by the Confederates on the evening of January 3rd into the morning of January 4th. We know that because it's well documented. And this battery is actually facing in a different way than the other batteries are. This is actually facing a little inlet of the Potomac River right here that the USS Yankee was getting into to fire down the line of the Confederate batteries. The Confederates saw that, the engineers saw the weakness here, and they were quickly putting in a gun battery here. And the next morning on the 4th, when the United States Navy comes back down the Potomac River, they find this battery is placed and the other ones are totally fixed. At that point, the Navy goes back to Lincoln and tells Lincoln, we cannot do anything about these batteries until the infantry, the Army can work with us to remove the Confederates from this spot. Now, nothing the United States Army or Navy will do to get rid of these batteries. What happens in March of 1862, the Confederate Army that was located here in Prince William, Fairfax, and Loudoun County under Joseph Johnston decided that they needed to be closer to Richmond. Johnston was very worried about the growing army in D.C. McClellan had around 110,000 men. Johnson himself had around 60,000. He felt that he was very exposed and far away from his supply line. So in early March, Joe Johnson is going to pull the Confederate Army out of here toward Fredericksburg. And when he does that, these batteries obviously will no longer exist. Interesting enough, though, as important as these were, Johnson didn't give word to the battery commanders up here very quickly. So they got word they had to leave in about 24 hours. So most of the guns here were either spiked or thrown. We know of one that was thrown over the bluff here at Possum Nose. When the Union Army comes up here in March, I'm going to read a quote to you. This is from March 10th. This is from a newspaper reporter with the New York Herald. He's up here with the United States Army as they come up here to inspect these batteries once the Confederates have left. And he's going to write, the magazine that had been left so that upon being opened, so it might explode and blow all around it to atoms. So the Confederates had booby-trapped some of these gun batteries. The great guns, which had been loaded to the muzzle and so arranged that they might burst upon our arrival. When the fortification was entered, all proved harmless. The carriages were split up and burned. The guns left in the sand or thrown over the bank. Shot and shell and other military property were loaded all over the ground behind the batteries. And soon silence and desolation reigned along the shore, so lately trodden by rebel feet and shaken by the war of their artillery. One of the most interesting things that's documented up here at Possum Nose Cockpit Point by a Union soldier is that he found 40,000 cigars in one of these batteries. You can imagine, I don't know how accurate that number is because who would count 40,000 cigars? But that just gives you an idea that the Confederates here left a lot of supplies behind when they pulled out of here. And so it was a very quick end to the gun batteries here. But by March 10th, 1862, these guns were silenced and there would no longer be any impacts to the Potomac River throughout the rest of the war. Our next stop is going to be at one of the hut sites and one of the Confederate campsites here at Cockpit Point. So one of the things a lot of historians forget about is the impact of soldiers on the landscape in the community that they're in. Now, Cockpit Point, as I said, was 4 gun batteries, probably between 500 and 700 men would have been manning the guns and supporting those batteries, located all on the ground here on the Potomac River. But before the war, there were homes, there were farms in this part of Prince William County. And those people are directly impacted by the fact that now thousands upon thousands of soldiers in their 20s and 30s are now living across their farms, eating their livestock, taking up their crops. And so here, around the Possum Nose area, there were several farms that were directly impacted by the men that were camped here, especially in the winter of 1861-62. I'm right now standing in a winter hut that was built by the Confederate Army for some soldiers. Now, we have yet to do archaeology out here, and that's one of our long-range goals before we open this up to the public, is to do some archaeology to identify these huts and try to get a good idea of where they all are. We know where about a dozen of these huts are located, but as you walk across the ground here, you can see evidence of other winter huts. If you have several hundred men stationed here over the winter of 1861-62, obviously they're going to require a lot of places to live and a lot of huts. But this particular hut is interesting because they use the landscape here, they use the bank here to dig in to the bank and use the ground as part of the wall structure for the hut. In the back would have been a brick or a stone fireplace hearth, and we know these are brick because there's evidence today of 19th century bricks. This brick probably came from a nearby farm. We have several accounts of the civilians living nearby complaining to the Virginia governor and the Confederate government in Richmond about how the Confederate soldiers were tearing down their buildings for the brick. This is probably one of those bricks that was stolen by a soldier to build the fireplace and the hearth here. Now, sadly, I'm holding this brick in my hand because there's been some relic hunting in this property before the county got this land. Relic hunting is now here forbidden on this property. The reason for that is if someone comes in and to dig up the resource here without proper evidence, without proper research, we lose all of the information that could be contained here in this hut. There's so much out there that we don't know about this landscape and the history of the people that were here that could be lost by relic hunting. So relic hunting is strictly forbidden at county historic sites, state historic sites, and federal historic sites. But some relic hunter here years ago came in, found something, and dug up a lot of the brick that were located in this particular winter hut. Now, this property encompasses about 115 acres of land. It includes the riverfront here. We also have a really nice pond with some eagle's nest on this property. Our long-range plan is to open this at some point in time to the public. We'll probably open up the pond area first with some nature trails, some green space for people who live near here to get out and enjoy the landscape. And eventually we hope to open up the historic side of the property where these huts are located, where the gun batteries are located, because not only is there great history here, there's also some great nature. And there's some beautiful views of the Potomac River that we love to have the public enjoy as much as the staff gets to enjoy them when we come out here. Now, this land was given to the county in 2016 by the Potomac Shores Development, which is now being built along the Cherry Hill Peninsula. And this was part of the proffer with that development. And we're very happy that we are now able to at least preserve this, take care of it. And one day, we hope that we'll be able to invite you, the public, out here to enjoy this resource as we do too. Thanks for joining us.